So today we are talking about imaginary or complex numbers. So before we even start, our Common Core standard is N for number sense, NC1, and it is know that there is a complex number I such that I squared equals -1. Okay, so for us, what's even more important is the fact that I is just equal to the square root of -1, okay? So that's our Common Core, but what I really want you to go ahead and know is this piece right here, that I is equal to the square root of -1, okay? Now, how does that help us? Well, so let's look at example 1. This is not hard. Now, first of all, I told you that we cannot take the square root of -9. Can't. In fact, if you go to your calculator, do the square root, clear, square root of -9, error, right? Can't do it. So the way we're going to do it is this way. Watch. I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 9 times the square root of -1. Okay? And the square root of 9 is 3. And the square root of -1 is I. So there's our answer. All I did is took the square root of 9 and made the negative part into I. Yeah, it's easy. This is not hard. Yeah, it's just that easy. It's not hard. Okay, number 2, I'll break it into the square root of 4, the square root of 3, the square root of -1, right? Because that makes 12, -12. You agree? Makes -12. You guys agree with that? Square root of 4 is 2. There is no square root of 3 except for just some ugly decimal. So we leave it as the square root of 3. And then we attach on the I. That's all we do. It's not hard, is it? It's not hard at all.
I have a question.
Yes, Avi.
How do you know that it's 4-3 but not 3-4?
Oh, great question. It is. It's the same. So if I went square root of 3, square root of 4, same thing, great question. But I always like to put the one that has the, when I write it, I like to put the one that has the square root first. Okay, it's the same thing, right? And square root of 4 would be 2, right? But I really want the 2 to be in front of this. You're just because when we get done, right, we want to put the whole number in front of the square root. It just looks better, okay? Yes, good question. Very good question. Okay, now, example 3. Got a 3. I'm going to go square root of 4, square root of 5, and square root of -1. And 80, you could put 5 and 4, but you know I like the 4 first, right? Because then it pops out in front, right? Okay, so then I'm going to go 3 times 2 times the square root of 5 times I, right? Which is 6 square root of 5 I. Okay, example 4. Now before we do example 4, write this down somewhere. We need 2 answers. We have to have 2 answers because of the x squared, okay? This is what we've been doing the last few days. With an x squared, you have to have 2 answers, right? So when I take the square root, we get a plus or minus. So what I'm going to do is take the square root of both sides to solve it. I'm going to go square root, okay? And then the square cancels the square root. And I'll have an x is equal to. Now, I've got to go plus or minus because of the 2 answers, right? The positive and the negative. Think of the square root of -81. Well, hopefully by now you're thinking, oh, okay, that's pretty easy, right? What's the square root of 81? 9. But we're going to have a 9i. So it's just going to be plus or minus. I'll show every step. Square root of 81, square root of -1. You probably shortcutted it. Plus or minus 9. Okay? That's all. Okay, example 5. Let's see. Let's first of all common factor out a 3x. And then I'll have an x squared plus 25 equals 0, okay? So this will not factor because of the plus 25. This will not factor, but I can set them both equal to 0. Say, all right, 3x equals 0 and an x squared plus 25 equals 0, right? Divide, divide. One answer is 0. Minus 25, minus 25, x squared equals negative 25. I've got to square root it because it's square, so I'm going to square root it. But I know I've got to have two answers. Okay, I have two answers. So I go square root, square root. So to have two answers, we go plus or minus. Square root of 25 is easy. Square root of 25 is 5, right? But what about this negative? Right, I. Just going to write I because of the square root of a negative number. Okay, not too bad. You guys agree? Even though I is imaginary, and there's no application probably for you in your life, it's not hard. Okay? It's not hard, right? Okay, you guys ready? Turn the page. All right. All right, now this looks like yesterday's stuff. Remember yesterday's stuff? We want to solve it. So first thing I'm going to do is go minus 4, minus 4. You guys okay with that? So I'm just going to subtract. I brought the 4 over, subtract 4. I'm going to have a parentheses x minus 3 squared equals negative 4, right? Got to undo the square, so I square root it. So I'm going to square root it to cancel the square, and I square root this. So I'm going to get an x minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 4. But I can't have the square root of negative 4, can I? So I can't have a negative square root, so I'm going to have an I. I'm going to have an I because I can't have the square root of negative. And then I know the square root of 4 is just 2. So I'm going to change this to plus or minus 2i. Okay, this is not that hard, is it? So now I still have an x minus 3 equals plus or minus 2i. And I want to solve for x. I want to say x equals something, okay? So let's add my 3. So if I add my 3, I get, you can't add them, I get 3 plus or minus 2i. You cannot add them because one is real and the other is imaginary, okay? It's like having imaginary friends, right? They're not really there. You can't add them to your group, okay? And I do have two answers, 3 plus 2i, 3 minus 2i. Those are my two answers. Almost done. Okay, example 7. It says by completing the square. Okay, let's see. I've got that still here, right? So step 1, move c to the other side. I'll do that. So I have an x squared minus a 10x equals a negative 35, right? Okay, then there's nothing to factor out. You guys agree? Nothing to factor out. So let's take half. Half of 10. What's half of 10? Square 5, what do you get? So half of this, right? So you get half of that is negative 5, and you square that, and you get a positive 25. So I'm going to add 25 to both sides, okay? Now, let's see what we get. My balance equation now factors. This is factor, right? So I factor. This factors into x minus 5, right? Equals a negative 10. You okay with what I've got? X minus 5. The same thing as an x minus 5 squared equals negative 10. Square root. Two answers. So I get an x minus 5 equals plus or minus. There is no square root of 10, by the way. It's just an ugly number, so I say square root of 10 I. There's no square root of 10, so I just left it as square root of 10. I, and the I came from the square root of the negative number, okay? Now the plus or minus, because I have two answers, right? Positive, negative answer. And now I'm going to add the 5, so I go plus 5. And again, I cannot add these. That's a real number. That's an imaginary number, so I leave it as simply a 5 plus or minus the square root of 10i. Okay. So, for homework, not that many. Not really. 2 through 5, 7, 29, 31, 33, 55, 93, 94. It's not that many. We've got plenty of time to get it done, right? Plenty of time. Is it going to stop recording on me?